Yeah, I mean, especially with the work at in Easton, that's definitely a focal point with that work. Thinking about the relationships of the history and how it affects the way we live today and the problems we face today and the issues that exist today. And really trying to make a connection between um, the evolution of policies that were enacted, 100 plus years ago, and how what that how that's evolved today. And some of the work, like when you look at my dad's work, these are these editorial cartoons that are like, it's a lot of information that he's trying to convey very, in a very short amount of space. And I think that's in some ways, although stylistically we're very different, I think that's something that I also have learned in my work, and I've been kind of learning to recognize. Like I'm trying to reference in a very short space, like these really complex issues and topics and stories. And then with the Easton work, I tried something new, which I haven't done before, which was using the QR codes to actually create like portals, knowledge portals for people on their phones. So if there's a piece of imagery, like, what is that? Like they can literally, like, there's an article about, or a Wikipedia entry about, different topics. And I was reticent to do that. A lot of my work, my favorite kind of art, the art that I like to consume or collect or look at, they're things that um, require the audience to investigate, either like through direct observation of the work or through, you know, asking questions after you've seen it or witnessed it, even maybe even like looking things up or researching, or, I like inquisitive work. And I try to do that in the work that I do. So create opportunities for people to, you know, to develop questions, rather than saying like, here are all the answers. This is everything. Like this is about A, B, and C. And I try to keep that open. And I was careful about the use of the QR codes to not be um, um, too specific or um, too simplistic, I guess, in the information that I was presenting. So some of those QR codes, I don't know if you've looked at any of them, but they might seem desperate to somebody who's not familiar with where I'm from or the issues that we face. Some are very clearly like around the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, or around, and some of them are images as well, like images of like just visuals of what it physically looked like the dead animals, the quantity of the dead buffalo and things like that. Thanks. Yeah, those QR codes, I mean, you don't see them, and well, I mean, they're marketing tools, right? You see them on like Coca-Cola, advertisements at the grocery store or whatever. Um, so like there was a period where I wouldn't have used those because it took more of like a young person, like it was more like only certain people really engaged with those. But I've noticed more and more, it's rare to see somebody not using a cell phone, regardless of their age or background, like a smartphone. I think most people kind of understand how to use those now, like, pulling their phones out and scanning them. And there is a lot of heritage in the work, but the one of the big things I think about is accessibility, because I feel like there are certain things that I can represent that are belong to my people and belong to me. So this work has a lot of these ghosts that I created. This like graphic, it's very graphic. It's this kind of almost like Casper the Friendly Ghost with horns. The idea being like what would a ghost, a buffalo ghost look like? That's what they're meant to represent. But that imagery doesn't exist within my traditional culture. Like it's not specifically something that I pulled off of like an old glyph or petroglyph, or it's a new image, and it's meant to be new specifically because I wanted people to be able to feel comfortable and able to like identify with it, or be able to like, it's this new contemporary imagery that comes from me and comes from my background, but also isn't exactly sacred or like um you know, a lot of the issues around indigenous art and imagery, we come across issues around like appropriation and misrepresentation, where this is an image that I feel like is a sort of outside of that in a lot of ways. So somebody will look at that and not immediately think of like Lakota people or indigenous people. And it's kind of this character that exists in between those spaces. So I do like I've made stickers of those things. They have some of this. These part of the agreement with the museum is to create prints from the installation for them to sell in the gift shop. It's I instead of doing like a traditional paper print, I opted to print on fabric to make a bandana. Working in that direction because it's less precious. Like I have training as a fine art printmaker. I've done, etching and worked with traditional stone lithography, and I've gone through these really complicated processes where, you put in all of this effort and energy, and you create these prints, and then they're expensive. Like they have to be sold for a certain amount of money. Whereas like silk screen on fabric, I can almost give them away, and I do. Like I sell these things, but also they're great. I can gift them to people, and they're less precious as an object because there's not a limited edition. They're not delicate materials, and they also have a use. The bandanas, part of my cultural traditions around art making, around adornment, and my people weren't said that they were nomadic, so they didn't live in towns or villages. They moved with the buffalo herds. So everything they carried had a purpose, had a job, and the way they expressed themselves visually and creatively was by the adornment of their tools, of their weapons, of their clothing, of their horses. One of my biggest goals is to have, to be an artist, to be successful, to engage with a broad audience in the world, but also to um, have my work in my tribal community, have it accessible to them and relevant to them as much as it is to a non-native audience in Easton, Maryland.